Yup, that's me when I was 7 years old. It was Christmas morning, I had the chicken pox, and I was completely miserable. I also asked for a puppy and got that stuffed one. I guess there was some kind of misunderstanding. Another thing that added to my lack of Christmas cheer was the nightie that my mom made us wear every year. It was made of fleece, never fit me right, and was pretty ugly, so I had to recreate it. I'm gonna use a comfy t-shirt for a pattern. I first marked off where I wanted the yoke to end. I doubled over the fabric, placed the t-shirt on top, and traced it out, adding a seam allowance and then cut it out. I don't know if you've ever had to wear one of these, but they were always super staticky, really tight in the armpit, and the sleeves were always a weird length, so I wasn't overly concerned about this being perfect. But I did try my best to make it a scaled up version of one that I had to wear when I was younger. I realized I traced over the back of the neck instead of the front, so I needed to cut off a little more so it would fit. Then I measured to see how much length I would need. I remember these nighties were never long enough because I was always so tall, so I wanted this one to be at a weird length. The front also had some small gathers, so I made sure to cut the bottom a little wider by shifting the t-shirt in a bit and then traced the rest of the armhole to the side seam. I marked the length that I wanted and then cut it out. You can see how the bottom is a bit bigger, so I gathered that section by hand, trying to make the stitches as even as possible. I lined up the top and bottom and smoothed out the gathers so it fit evenly. Then I laid the pieces right sides together and stitched along the edge. I cut 3 pieces of red ribbon for the trim and stitched them down. Then I laid the front on some more doubled up fabric to get the piece for the back. I ended up cutting the sides under the armhole extra wide, and it's a good thing I did because it would have been way too small otherwise. I put the front and back right sides together and stitched along the top. Then I cut a slit in the middle back because these nighties always had one of those pearl button closures that dug in while you're trying to sleep. I cut a piece of scrap to use as the facing. I cut a slit in the facing and then laid that right sides together on top of the back panel. I also used this random piece of ribbon that I got in my Christmas stocking to make the loop that will go around the button. I put it between the layers and stitched everything together. I snipped the corners so everything would lay flat and flipped the facing to the inside. Then I top stitched everything in place. I added some gathers on the back arm section up to the top because that's the only way I could think to make everything line up since I made it bigger. I highly doubt the original nightie had this, but it ended up working really well. Then I tried to measure the length for the arm on myself, which was a little tricky. I traced out the armhole using the sleeve of the t-shirt and just extended the length. After adding seam allowance, I cut 2 out. I placed the sleeve right side together with the rest of the nightie, smoothed out the back gathers so they weren't very noticeable, and stitched it together. Next, I needed to add the giant ruffles at the bottom, which honestly were my favorite part of the whole thing. Luckily, the pattern went all the way to the selvage edge of one side, so I just cut a long strip so I wouldn't have to finish the bottom edge. Then I added it to the front and back by scrunching the strip together and stitching it to the main piece. I thought it would be way faster this way, but it ended up taking forever. 0 out of 10, would not recommend. It did end up looking really cool though. Then I matched up the sides of the whole thing and stitched it together. Okay, so I'm definitely glad I made it bigger. It's pretty tight in the shoulders, which is exactly how it's supposed to be. The sleeves are short, but I think they're actually a little too short. I'm gonna add some extra fabric along the bottom and then add the elastic in the seam of that. So hopefully that'll create the look that I'm going for. Oh my gosh, it's so funny. I just need to finish the neck and add the button and it should be good to go. I can feel the static already, so it's pretty true to life. Okay, let's see if I can get this off. I need to sit down. Which I had to do because I can't raise my arms in my basement since the ceiling is so low. Oh yeah, there's the static. I measured the neck and then made some bias tape out of a piece of scrap. I opened up one side and laid it right side to the inside of the neck and stitched it in place. Then I trimmed and folded the edges in and folded the rest of the bias tape to the outside. Then I just top stitched it in place. I gotta say, for never making anything like this before, it was looking pretty good. Anyway, I needed to finish the sleeve, so I measured how wide it was and then estimated how much length I would need and cut it out of some scraps. I put them right side together and stitched along the short edge. This wasn't along the selvage edge, so I did fold it in twice to create a tiny hem. I opened up the seam for the sleeve and the cuff and placed the cuff inside the sleeve right sides together, making sure the fabric was even, and then stitched it in place using a wide seam allowance. I used my handy magnetic seam gauge, which kept my seam allowance perfectly even the whole way around. Then I estimated how much elastic I would need for each cuff. I trimmed down the extra seam allowance from the sleeve, leaving the cuff seam allowance so I could fold it over to create a channel for the elastic. I stitched as close to the edge as possible, leaving a little gap to put the elastic in later. I used the safety pin technique to put the elastic in the channel. Then I sewed the ends of the elastic together and stitched the opening shut. The whole thing was looking exactly how I remembered it. Finally, I just had to sew the button on. Makara, Rachel, Bernadette, and so many other great sewing YouTubers spend their time making elegant dresses, and I did this. And now, without further ado, let's get magically whisked away to that Christmas long ago when I was 7 years old and wanted to stay in bed and didn't get a puppy.
Come on downstairs now. Let's open up your presents.
Dana, come on, let's go.
Come on, Dana, come on downstairs. I know you don't feel good.
Dana, let's go, come on.